My name is Vincent, or but anyway, I make films and I've been researching about, let's say, music for the past 5-6 years in parts of the world that I didn't know before, let's say, and I've been just traveling and recording music and images in different cultures.
Hey, oh, I don't know if it works. Yeah, okay, I'm Ion Dumitrescu, coordinating the label Future Nuggets, perhaps you know already, and so I'm also involved with performance arts, with theory. We'll continue.
Yeah, hello, I'm Sebastian, otherwise known as Booty Carrell, which is my name as a DJ. My task in life is to introduce music to people, whether it's via DJing or in a record shop or radio or whatever.
Hello. Hi, I'm Rabih Beaini. I'm from Lebanon, and I'm actually still looking for a real job. So occasionally I put some music and I produce some records.
Hello, my name is Maurice Louca. I'm a musician. I play under my name and in other acts and bands, and yeah, I think that's about it.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Outernational is a word that I'm familiar with from its usage in a Jamaican context, and in fact, as somebody who lives in London, the first place that I really became of that, aware of the word and the concept was in the context of reggae sound systems, and specifically one of London's most important reggae sound systems, which was called Sir Coxsone's Outernational. Sir Coxsone's Outernational was founded in 1968 by Lloydie Coxsone and Festus, the selector, and it was so called because it was not only was it one of the most important sounds in London, but it was the first of the London reggae sounds to begin to play regularly outside London and in Europe, and so the Outernational tag was added to that by the sound system by Lloydie Coxsone to represent that aspect of their practice, as I understand it. And so it comes to us as a word in those sorts of contexts, which has to do with the dissemination and the dispersal of music, with taking music outside of one context and bringing it into another, a state of movement and a state of becoming. To me, that's what the word has always signified in that context. So that's where I come into it. But to get us moving more substantially, I'd like to hand over to Ion, who's written a very good paper on the concept and on the history.
From Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, it functions really somehow parallel to this sort of industry that we would call international, that has labels, that has this kind of distribution, distributors, that has this copyright, is very obsessed with copyright, and all this other, let's say, expressions like wedding music, like Manele, for example, they function in a different world, in a different dimension. Where, for example, YouTube is the stock market of the music. So where people would, they would make video clips or things to put on YouTube in order to be called at weddings, in order to be, so they put their phone number there, so that they don't rely on CDs or I know, somehow the wedding music is developing the industry of that music. Although Manele has, let's say, breached into pop sometimes, it still functions mainly in this parallel universe. You don't have really a niche with labels, noise label, let's say, that you can survive into your niche. Usually there's one person who does this or does an experiment, but you don't have a scene around you. So you can function, you can be outernational, not necessarily doing Manele or wedding music. You can live in this outskirts of the industry without, for example, Future Nuggets, my label, it's kind of a bridge to the international. I'm releasing through Juno, which is in London, so although I kind of make hybrids with Manele and I'm playing with this Outernational, I'm already having a step or like a foot in the international industry. So for me, it was this industry, how it functions, and it doesn't necessarily regard a specific sound. I mean, the West always had this academy, the idea to put everything in a category or to build it, like to build historically. Well, whether in this outernational histories are much more fragmented, there is no really conscious or this awareness of history, of putting together piece by piece and going, you know, if you want to know where is the start of Manele, and you go, I know, I go to the library and I will check the start of Manele, Dan Armenka, no, there's so, and I think this also is in Syria or wherever you go, this history fragmented, perforated, out of, you know, coup d'etat, dictatorships, all kind of stuff that happens in the international world that kind of breaks all this history. It's impossible to write a kind of coherent and linear history.
One of the things that you pick up in your paper, which I think is a very important distinction, is the distinction between the things that you like to call outernational and things which in a previous iteration of the record industry were called world. I wonder if you'd like to just speak on that before we move along.
For me this is quite important, it's true, because world music is already a niche. It's very, it's a Western-based niche that deals and with a very specific, and it functions already international. For me, world music is international. It's how let's say the West has perceived or managed to encapsulate the exotic, you know, and the exotic always has to be a little bit primitive with acoustic instruments, you know, it's always this kind of infantilization of the periphery. That's why, for example, something like Electro Chabi or from Cairo sounded so rough with electronic, and like Manele, it's a very electronic. It has something from the past, but it's already projecting the future. So it's not so long. I mean, for me, world music, this is very problematic, that it tames all this peripheral it tames them. It keeps them really safe and without any kind of asperities or.
You made mention there of the scene in Cairo specifically. I wonder, Maurice, if you'd like to pick up on that and speak a little bit about your experience in that scene.
Well, I mean, it sounds the parallels. I mean, it's kind of what he's discussing, this idea of other markets, and I think from my experience working, I mean, briefly with them, I wouldn't say I'm part of that scene, but I've collaborated. The amazing thing about this scene is this idea of a lack of market. I mean, these guys record their music very cheaply at home. They have, through the internet, they can, you know, post the stuff online and get, like he said, like work through this. Also, they make money from it, and they're very, very aware how to make money from it. And so this idea of this you can no longer contain it. You don't need a record label, you don't need someone to pay for a studio. So, and Egypt, as you know, like a lot of other societies, there's this classist issue with it. Like, this is like street music, this is bullshit, this is not fine arts and that kind of stuff. So it doesn't get radio play, it doesn't get TV access, that kind of stuff. In the past, now it's hard to avoid this. And I think that's the real strength of what's happening now, and I guess not only in Egypt, it's obviously everywhere. Is this idea that accessibility is no longer for the few. I mean, you can really have access to large crowds and to end music, not necessarily through the obvious means. And that also translates into venues. Like what you imagine as a scene as venues, in a Western sense, does not apply in Cairo. Most of the music that's being played is not being played in venues. It's being played, not just weddings also, but if you want to open a barber shop, you have a concert in front of it to kind of promote. You want to do this, so it's like, so if someone had asked me like, what's the music scene like in Cairo? If you want to talk about it in a Western sense, there's maybe like 10 venues, but it does not apply. It's a very different thing. So, and finally, I think something that's very interesting, discussing copyrights. When I was recording the last record, I collaborated with an MC called Ala 50, who's kind of one of the stars of the Maharaganat scene, and I wanted him to sing, or not sing, MC in a certain style, there's different styles, and to use these particular words that I'd heard in another song. And I asked him, do you think it's possible to do this, or is this going to be copyrights issue with the guy who sang it? And he looked at me and he's like, this is ridiculous, what does copyright mean? No one writes this shit. He's like, we all use it, it's in the street, like, do you think anyone owns this? And he's like, my only problem here is that if I sing it, his stuff, he's gonna think I'm saluting him, and he's gonna be very happy. And I don't like that guy, so I don't want to make him happy. So for him, the concept is copyright is not that you're a thief, you're stealing. It's like you are giving me tribute, which is the opposite completely of how the West thinks. Exactly. So that's kind of also talk about different markets. So for him, it was like, no, it's like I'm giving him tribute and I don't want to. It's not about stealing.
Sure. I mean, one of the things that we discussed, we discussed the matter of local audiences and kind of internally focused scenes a little bit last night. One of the things about the world scene was that it functioned very much as a series of gatekeepers who would take music from outside of the Euro-American world and then present it. And present it in very specific ways with very specific packaging and with very specific kind of context. I think that one of the features that you pick up on in relation to the idea of the Outernational is that many of these scenes, such as the scene in Cairo, as you mentioned, aren't focused outwards, and they are interested in local audiences much more than international audiences. I mean, now the Cairo scene's had a lot of attention recently, but that's not because it's sought, as I understand it, that's not because it's sought international attention so much as international attention has picked up on it. Was that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the good thing about Cairo is it's a huge country. I mean, it's 100 million, so it's really most people working there. Sorry, Cairo is a city. Egypt is 100 million. Cairo is 20 million. This is how centralized Egypt is. We think Cairo is no, I'm just kidding. So most of the scenes, I mean, there are a few small scenes that are, more westernized, looking outwards, but most music getting played in Cairo, it's really serving the local market. There's no that interest of being outside looking inside, or like doing music with an eye on the outside. It's really, there is such a huge fan base in Egyptian music that can really absorb so much different kinds of music. I think most people working there, their real main focus is the local market, not the international market. And I know that's not the case for other smaller countries where you can kind of have a career, you have to look outside. But Cairo, I think it's good in that sense that it's really about most people working there are really looking for the community in that sense, the greater community of this huge city or country.
I'd just like to pivot slightly now and move to you, Rabih. I mean, you're a person, as an artist and a musician, and as a person who runs a record label. You've worked in the Middle East and in Europe. I wonder, as somebody who's worked across boundaries and beyond boundaries and borders during your career, how these sorts of ideas resonate with your experience as an artist.
The ideas that we're discussing right now. Yeah. I would go beyond my own experience. I think if I want to pack it in my experience, it would be like the research experience or collection of records, we'll call it like this. I would agree partially on what has been told so far, and the fact that we are kind of taking out Outernational out of the word music specification is actually we are putting it in a genre or in a box itself, and I think it's not really the exact point to see it. What we consider word music today is what was happening generally, is what came out when Real Word record label started putting out all these collections of incredible musicians and pioneers or great players or singers or whatever. So at the time it was almost the same thing that is happening today with the Outernational thing that we're talking about. So I kind of wouldn't take it out of it. Like I wouldn't. For me, what is Outernational or global or post-global is more related to the attitude. And I would give credit now to what Maurice was saying is about the MC and the way he was like looking at the thing or how the market works. It's more the attitude to it. Partially, and partially it's actually reverting what the word music was doing so far until now. It wasn't a niche. It's only just placed until lately on the same level of classical music and theater and opera. So it was like more elitistic in a way. Like what we define word music is Ravi Shankar or El Shankar or I don't know, many other musicians that we know since we were kids. So now it's more accessible to the lower class of musicians, but this applies to everyone. It's not only because they come from another place, and we see it as an international thing. So I'm kind of confused about the actual definition of international. The way I see it is that reverting the way you approach the crowd or the listener or the Western market, let's call it like this, is absolutely the opposite. Like, while until now you had to kind of please and kind of bring the best and the more refined art that you had in your country and present it on a huge stage with like 50,000 people looking at it or listening or absorbing it. Now it's you bring your own music, whether it comes from your country or not. It can be you can be from Southeast Asia and you play something that comes from Peru or South America or something like inspired by that, and melt it with some rock music or electronic music or whatever it is, but it's yours. It starts to be packed as your own music, and you present it, and then the crowd will come to you, and you don't have to please the crowd. You have just to, the attitude that the West has had with all the rest of the world so far. That's the way I see it. I see it more widely, more broadly.
Sure, absolutely. That makes perfect sense.
I was just, for me, the distinction between world music and you're right. At the beginning, world music was just a term. They invented the term to describe what was happening.
I don't even know what is field recordings actually. What do you mean by that? I'm very sorry. I just like to, I'm very honest. I just do not know what does it mean.
Oh, it simply mean anything that's not a studio recording, really.
So it means recordings.
It means recordings, but historically, I suppose it's typically it's a phrase which I suppose comes out of the anthropological tradition, and in the same way that they say field work, which is just kind of work, and field recordings are part of that anthropological tradition. So I mean, it seems to me that the work you do, I mean, you'll forgive me if I'm wrong, which involves the filming and recording of, say, ceremonies in fairly distant parts of the world from where you and I are from. I wonder how those sorts of things, and say perhaps Lawrence recordings, fit into the sort of I suppose the economy of global music that's being spoken about here.
No, I'm just really curious about the fact that we apply such terms to define. I mean that we call field recordings actually what simple recordings of music played in its natural environment says a lot, I think, to our condition of thinking music, and how I think actually we've been living in this very artificial relationship to the world of recordings for so long, because actually putting music inside a studio is taking it away from its environment. So basically it's like cutting original link to what this music is about, I think so. And I have not much interest actually personally in album recordings, in studio recordings, because I always felt there was incredible lack of like what is the whole surroundings, the whole life away from just the pure musical instrument and how it sounds in its perfect capture. And I swear I've been trying to integrate as much as possible in my own films the surroundings and the sounds of the things passing by, and I think this is beautiful to have a child crying in the back at some point, to have birds passing by, and there's some fabulous recordings. I was listening to some recordings made in the Mapuche tribes in Chile, made by a guy in the 90s, where you have all the nature around inside the recording. It's absolutely stunning. How beautiful is that? And then again, I don't know. Just to maybe continue on, I think what we were just like talking about the words. I've been trying my personal relationship to music and everything has been trying to get away of wording things basically, and trying to get away from naming. Trying to get away from naming and trying to get away from like finding new genres all the time and like oh this is like a new trend, we're gonna give it a new name, and actually by doing so you trap it quickly. You trap it in its like very natural evolution. There is no names in nature. Nature has been evolving based on the fact that it's never been trapped into definitions and so on. And I think the Western approach to the world in general, and especially to the world of music, has been artificially like limiting actually the possible movements of things. And again, that's I guess the danger of like very quickly applying new terms. We don't need to apply those new terms. I think we just need to let the flow going, and that is really exciting to see this flow going at high speed nowadays due to the digital world and the fact that in the past 10 years so many people have been access to incredible cultures from all around the world. And suddenly, whoa, it just open and there is no genres anymore. You're just mixing and it goes from listening to this, to that, and there's no borders anymore. And last night it was amazing to be playing here. This incredible environment, playing with Rabih, and after to have this Mandela music on stage, and we're like, whoa, this is it. We're really finally reaching that moment where we are away from genres, away from words, maybe in a sense, you know. And that's, I'm very happy with that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ion, do you want to?
Yeah, I would say. That's why I was so, so relaxed in disregarding also this term outernational. It serves for, it's pretty general and abstract to serve a broad let's say many issues at the moment, but for me, outernational should be about this kind of future. It should also hint somehow in the future, or like give a glimpse of how the future might look like, pre-modern with modern together, compressed, and giving a sort of a new prehistory for other kind of, development. So it's like, I was just reading this Bruno Latour, maybe you've heard, he says about the postmoderns that, we can, how long can we follow the moderns? How long can you keep this term postmodern? I mean, for how long can we succeed the moderns? So for me, what happened last night, and in general, also within the Manele field, you can have a taste of the future with this kind of wedding, but electronical, psychedelic. There is something new, like the conditions for a new prehistory for me. So somehow to go to the future.
I mean, the future is maybe always a good place to start thinking about the past. Amongst other things that have happened in the last, say, 10 to 15 years in music is an increasing kind of acceleration of the recovery of music scenes from outside the kind of Euro-American zone, or marginalized music scenes within that zone that had their own histories, which largely remained off and outside of the international markets at the time that they occurred. Typically, as you mentioned again in your essay, but then typically you're talking about scenes which kind of modernist scenes, effectively, in my mind, that tended to flourish from the 60s through to the 80s, and as you say, are often curtailed by revolution or totalitarianism or war. Those sorts of scenes and compilations, especially as a kind of genre of, as a kind of type of marketing object, which would cover those sorts of historical music scenes, seem to me to be, at the moment, have a very high degree of importance in a kind of expansion of people's ideas about music from elsewhere. You've certainly, Ion, have mentioned that, but I mean, I don't know if anybody wants to speak on that, because there's more. Yeah, perhaps Sebastian would be good, because there's more old music around than there ever has been in some ways.
Yes, and it's of course that's a bit of a problem as well, because it doesn't fully support the new and the current music. But I made up my mind for such a long time on why this is so popular, especially the 70s stuff, why this is getting so much regard, and it has something to do with now, and it has something to do with the content of that era. That this music holds visions of a future that never happened, and this future has been destroyed by various dictators and so on and so on. And we haven't fulfilled these visions yet, and I think these visions get more valid and important in our daily life as we see what's going on in the world right now. So I think this is why this is so popular and valid at the moment. And but my greatest hope is that it will support the current music scenes, and that people don't just overlook what's going on right now, that they actually go visit concerts, invite bands, and yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to speak on that as well.
Yeah, it's like trying to make this kind of recovery as fast as possible to reach the contemporary days somehow, right? No, I think it's very interesting that you say this. I mean, it's like this generative nostalgia. So you have inhibitory nostalgia, which you're nostalgic about things, then you want to keep them as they are. And then you have generative nostalgia. It's like going back to this kind of unfulfilled futures, like utopians, and trying to take it from the nostalgia for some ideas or for some direction, a nostalgia that didn't somehow was fulfilled. It's interesting.
And I suppose it has bearing on the economic question as well, because a lot of times, and there are questions over the way that a lot of archival historical music comes into Euro-American markets at this point, I think, I think there are questions about to be asked about the way that artists are remunerated, and the way that due attention is paid to the people that made those scenes. Because fundamentally, again, this goes back to some of the questions about economies that we were talking about earlier. I think that perhaps fundamentally you see the absorption of previously untapped areas into the markets of the West in ways which they were never touched by them when they happened, but they can now be tapped, mined for gain in a way which is quite problematic in some ways. So I don't know if anybody wants to. That's just my comment, I think.
Which way problematic?
Well, because I think that sometimes there's sometimes there are questions of presentation, there are questions of value. I mean, in some ways, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, and perhaps what you were saying about the idea of world as a category. And I feel like very ambivalent about it, but I don't have much of a problem with it. It was a kind of solution for people at a time, and it was not necessarily always a negative solution. It's very positive for a lot of musicians, for instance.
I think this applies on all music industry. Like we're trying to frame problems within the theme, but they exist on really the whole music industry. Once you go out from the majors or the wide music industry thing, you go into these fields where things get exploited or not, things get paid or not, things get respected, credited or not, and that happens from rock to house and techno to field recordings or whatever. It's more of a generic problem related to the honesty of who's dealing with these things and how much they want to give back to the musicians or to the scene. Again, there's Creative Commons, there's rock band not going in the music industry like the conventional one, hip hop. Well, you can find really everything. I think what changed is the channel, the communication. You needed to go in with a really good recorder or in a studio, finish the work, do the lacquer, press the record, and hope to sell it. Today, you just had your iPhone. You can do a video, put it on YouTube, and get a million views and make much more money than what those guys did. Or the compilation that did the sounds from the Sahara, that was recorded from cell phone tunes. That was on
Sahel Sounds.
Exactly, Sahel Sound. So it's just the communication or the channel or the market changed based on the communication. What you were saying earlier about YouTube videos of wedding bands that want to promote themselves. In the past, they were doing CDs. Earlier, they were doing probably small flyers or whatever. This thing is completely free, and they don't have to pay for it, and it works, if not equally, even better. But that's the internet, and that's the biggest.
Hip hop is an interesting example there because it's been the last sort of 10 years. It's moved over to almost a completely free distribution model where almost everything is given away online for nothing.
Absolutely, it's a choice. It's only the choice of whoever wants to work with it. And I can give you examples of people, musicians that are branded under the Outernational word or sphere today, that are really picky on getting their money, getting their copyrights, getting their, like, completely the opposite of what we've been talking about, like the freedom of expression. It's really personal. It's very, very personal. And from a perspective of a discography working guy, I think it's the choice whether you want to do this job for making money out of selling records or making money out of promoting it and then making shows. It's just that kind of choice. It's really only like a management. It goes into the management field. Sure. In my opinion.
You mentioned their Creative Commons, and I know that Vincent, all of the stuff that you put up on your Petit Planet label is under Creative Commons. Would you like to just speak on your choice there?
For the past 10 years, I mean, all the work I've been doing has always been published for free on internet. And again, I think, as Rabih said, it's a personal choice I made because I found it the more coherent one.
Exactly.
Compared to my vision of the world and the society I'm excited to build with all of you today, in a sense. And I think we just push those ideas to the limit. You just end up thinking that, of course, the digital world means that basically the money which was attached to the materiality aspect is gone. So actually, if we're able to finally link back to this very actually, let's say, tribal almost way of being, like at the same time on a global scale, which is pretty fucking amazing. And so I've been just like releasing things for free because again, the whole relationship to copyright is very. Let me just maybe tell you a little story, which is very interesting. The fact is that I live in Brazil, and Brazil is a very good laboratory for culture on many levels. It's a bit advanced on certain levels. It's very retarded on others. But anyway, there is very advanced aspects of the society, especially the regards they have on their own history. You can put it on like basically poor education, and there's a truly poor aspect of education of the people in Brazil. But actually, that gives them a real beautiful freedom in regards to their own history. They don't feel buried under so many layers of histories and responsibilities, and you see this reacting in the culture as like the culture, and talking about the music, and actually I'm researching on like the sacred music, let's say, but there is not really that, for example, already there's not that separation at all in Brazil, right? And sacred and profane are not. It doesn't make sense to talk about and to think like that. And basically, you see like things being on a constant model of movement, and because people, do not feel they have to respect too much a certain norm and are able to move forward. And there is really incredible doctrine, religion, spirituality, let's say, named Santo Daime, which is really, really crazy thing. It appeared in the 20s. It has less than 100 years ago. And it's a mix of Catholicism, but like that type of Catholicism that you find in South America, which is pretty pagan, actually. Actually, you got to understand that the Portuguese people who went there to invade Brazil were not fully recognized by Portugal in a way. They were like the fucking like pagans, actually. They were like not fully like Catholicized in a sense. Huh? And so Brazil has always kept this kind of like very crazy, quasi surrealist Catholicism, as you can see it a lot actually, much more even in Peru. Anyway, and this got mixed in the 20s with with the plant, the ayahuasca, which is a psychoactive brew that you find in the Amazon, which has been used by indigenous people. The thing is that those two things mixed together created a new form of culture. It's beautiful. And which basically the point is that the songs, the musical aspect of this religion is absolutely amazing and constantly moving. What's happening is that during the rituals, people are receiving the songs, they are receiving the words, and they are writing them down. So basically, you will never have any relationship to copyrights there. There is tons and tons, and and I'm talking about thousands of songs already written, and they all fit into little books of hymns. And one ritual goes for maybe for like 4 or 5 hours, and people sing a full book of hymns. And there's like maybe 100, 120 songs. And we call those book of hymns received by. They're not the book of hymns of Padrino Sebastian, but it's the book of hymns received by Padrino Sebastian. And I think there we touched on something actually really interesting in what we call inspiration, creativity, and actually authorship on things. And they are just saying that basically this inspiration is just going through them. It just pass through them at some point. They write them down, but they will never apply any copyright or anything to that. And I think it's a very, very interesting link to make, maybe between like a very open type of spirituality and the digital world we live in nowadays. And I think that's a beautiful parallel to make in between that relationship to openness and how the digitalized world that we live in nowadays is absolutely pushing in that direction. And so, obviously, I'm using Creative Commons because that's just so far. That's the only way.
Okay. It means that I think that what remains to do is to really ask you if there's anything that you would like to say that hasn't yet been said about any of these issues that we're discussing. Ion, Rabih, Mark.
For me, I have to admit, embarrassingly, that the first time I heard of Outernational is at this festival. I actually thought Dragos came up with it for the festival, so I didn't realize that this is like new terminology being used. And it's not yet. It's not yet.
We're pushing it.
Oh wow! Because I have to say that I also share the same concerns as Rabih and the guys here, that I think this trying to put. It's understandable that it's kind of very reactionary, like this reaction to this idea of what are you going to DJ tonight, or this idea of the world music finding an alternative. But I really agree with Rabih that I think the idea of us suggesting, or not just particularly us, but the idea of suggesting a new term, I think is problematic. And I think we have to start thinking beyond that. I think a good thing about a festival like this is that you can't really say what kind of music is being played in terms of the official genres. And I think this is really the movement. I mean, this, neighborhood, urban condition. I mean, these things. It's really kind of, it's irrelevant what to call it. I think, and I just wanted to add. I didn't add anything new to what's being said. I just wanted to add kind of my support to this idea of. It's great and exciting for there to be a kind of the beginning of the end of terminology with this stuff. I think it's really that's the kind of the direction, and I think it's. I understand how it's problematic for academics and for the press and for all this stuff, but I think at the end of the day, this is the direction that the world is going into, and I think this, so that's just what I wanted to add.
Sorry, just one thing. I really don't know why this urge of killing terminology. I'm sorry to sound like the black sheep right now, but this is what I'm trying to say. I mean, we can still name things the way we want, or not name them. This is the part of the personal freedom. If I want to call something a genre, but actually you were still doing it while saying you don't want to do it, because he said, I don't want to call a genre or something, but we played and then there was this Manele thing after it. That's a genre, that's a term.
I was saying that it refers more at how an industry functions. So Manele, that's why it's very as an example of. So, but it might be anything else.
It needs to be called
exactly
Manele. It needs to be called Dabke. It needs to be called hip hop. in a way, of course, we are merging all these things all together because there's Dabke with hip hop, or there's, I don't know, but if we want to call it like this, we can be free to do it. Otherwise, we can say whatever. It's a lot of stuff all together, and it's beautiful. And
But
let's take it like this.
why I think also that
I don't-
we should name things in sometimes, because, for example,
Yeah,
power
and-
empowerment comes with naming. So, for example, when hip hop,
That's what I'm saying.
they
That's
empower
exactly what I'm
themselves by naming it hip hop. So, if, for example, Manele artists, they're afraid of Manele, to say Manele, because they know that Manele are not well regarded. It's low culture. So, actually, by naming it Manele, it's like a sort of, and being proud that they are playing Manele. It could be a sort of empowerment.
Say, let's not push the urge of changing the world just because we don't like it the way it is. That's what I'm trying to say. If someone likes, call Ravi Shankar's music word music, it's a liberty as well. This is like what I'm trying to say.
For me, the problem is, you can't compare Dabka to something like world music, you know, like as a terminology. And Dabka, like you're saying, it's coming more from the people who want to present it, and it's empowering for them. But the idea is how it's being labeled from the outside. And of course, everyone has the freedom to say whatever they want, and you know, someone could hear something, think it's metal or whatever. But like, and you know, like, so this idea of that we're going to kill terminology, of course, is absurd. What I was trying to say is this need for these things to be categorized, and I think at the end of the day, it's if it's part of what you're presenting to name something, to give it empowerment, of course, you know, like everyone has the right to do that. But what you constantly see is these things getting incorporated and named things that are not necessarily represent that. And you know, like going back to Egypt, I mean, Electro Shabi is a term that came in Holland. It's a Dutch term. What's happening in Egypt? I mean, it has nothing to do. Was coming, and of course these guys have the right to do this and that kind of stuff, but you know, where's the empowerment there? I mean, they completely changed. So this idea.
You see, this is the branding that comes from the West on a music that is made in North Africa or Middle East or whatever, but is actually inspired by the West because there's keyboards and beats, but then it's Arabic music, but then there's a singer and a hip hop guy, and you know, this is exactly what I'm trying to say. Like the borders have fallen already, and we don't have to find an urge to define the moment when these borders have already fallen. Like this urge of wanting to kill terminology, let it stay there. We don't use it, and somebody else will use it, and that's the creative common thing also in the way we think music, and we file it, we categorize it, because we also sometimes need to do that for ourselves.
Okay. That's okay. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. Thanks once again to the panel, Vincent, Ion,
Thank you,
Sebastian,
friends.
Rabih, Maurice, and thanks again to Dragos. Thank you very much. And thanks again to